They hanged a mother, but perhaps what the United States truly executed that day was its own innocence about justice. On July 7, 1865, in the courtyard of Old Arsenal Military Prison in Washington, D.C., a woman stood motionless under the scorching July sun. Her hands were bound, her legs trembling, her face remarkably calm behind a black veil. Her name was Mary Elizabeth Jenkins, Surratt Catholic widow, boarding house owner, mother of 3 children, and the first woman ever sentenced to death by the U.S. federal government. The indictment read, "Conspirator in the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln." Yet from that moment until today, history has yet to conclusively answer. Did Mary Surratt truly commit a crime? Or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time because she was a woman? The backdrop was the bloody aftermath of the Civil War. Lincoln's symbol of national unity was shot dead at Ford's Theater by John Wilkes Booth, Southern actor with radical ideas. The authorities needed a powerful message, a heavy punch to quash all hopes of rebellion. Within days, dozens of suspects were brought in for interrogation. Among them was Mary, who had rented Booth a room in her H Street boarding house. Her home, according to accusations, was where Booth and his co-conspirators gathered to plan, hide weapons, and pass messages. Mary was arrested simply because she was the mother of John Surratt, Jr., a fugitive seen with Booth, and so her son's shadow became the noose tightening around her neck. Court documents stated that Mary Surratt was present when plans were discussed, that she knew and did not prevent. The most critical evidence came from Louis Weichmann, her son's close friend, who lived in the house and testified that he had seen Booth's associates visiting. But these testimonies appeared after intense interrogations, under heavy pressure, and were presented in a military tribunal, not a civilian court. This drew particular attention from European scholars. While criminal laws in Britain, France, and Germany stipulated that women could not be executed without clear evidence of complicity, Mary was tried alongside armed men. She had no lawyer to prepare her defense, no right to contest the judge. The verdict was handed down within a few weeks. Yet, in another realm where the stories are not in official records, but in folklore the narrative is quite different. In Clinton, Maryland, where Mary was born and raised, she is remembered as a gentle, reserved, devout woman. An elderly man, a former pupil of hers, recounted, "Mary never talked politics. She only spoke of God." In a legend passed down through 3 generations, people say that on the night before her execution, guards heard singing from her cell a very old Latin hymn from where no one knew, according to an ethnologist in Baltimore. The song was a prayer for those who died unjustly, but still harbored anger. An ominous coincidence. In archives in Paris, a French historian studying the Mary Surratt case in the late 19th century wrote, "In a new country like America, justice is first tested in the blood of a woman. This is an indelible mark." Meanwhile, European newspapers were divided. The Times called it ruthless justice, while Le Figaro described it as a foolish fear cloaked in legal authority. But what was more terrifying was the reaction of the American public at the time. Almost no one voiced offense for Mary, in a society that valued men above all. And with a predominantly Protestant population, Mary was framed as a mysterious old woman, the witch mother of traitors. The media contributed to building an icon not of guilt but of rage. When prints of her hanging were sold as leaflets for 25 cents, people bought them as if they were a national sedative. Gradually, the name Mary Surratt ceased to be a person. It became a symbol of betrayal, of warning, and perhaps of a grave mistake. But perhaps she knew everything, knew Booth, knew the plan, knew the time and place. Maybe she was the mastermind behind the scenes, more cunning than her outward appearance suggested, because the only thing history leaves behind are conflicting stories and an irreversible death. No one truly knows what transpired within the cramped rooms of Mary Surratt's boarding house in the months leading up to President Abraham Lincoln's assassination. Official records describe it as a conspiracy headquarters, where her son John Wilkes Booth, moved in and out as if it were uninhabited. However, in many trials and testimonies, no one could definitively confirm that Mary knew exactly what was going to happen. The government's accusations claimed she not only knew, but actively supported the plot. Yet neighbors, lodgers, and especially the family's familiar priest described Mary as a devout woman, an ordinary small business owner, living day to day, attending church weekly, adhering strictly to her conservative Catholic faith. So, where lies the truth between these opposing narratives? In Europe, many 20th century historians, when studying Lincoln's assassination and the suspects' roles, expressed unease with how the U.S. military handled Mary. Without tangible evidence, without confessions, and with no signs that she had wielded a gun, written letters, or directly participated in the conspiracy, her execution seemed questionable compared to Victorian British law or 19th century French criminal justice. Executing a woman based on psychological assumptions and blood relations would likely have been illegal. That's why, in academic conferences in Oxford and Paris, Mary Surratt's name was often mentioned as a moral gray area in post-civil war American justice, a reflection of grief unhealed and revenge overtaking legal calm. On the day of her arrest, Mary refused all accusations. She dressed in black, remained composed, and asked only whether she could see her son. John Surratt had fled to Canada, then Europe, living as a political ghost. There are stories that he even reached the Vatican, joining the Papal Guard as a way to evade international fugitive status. These details are not in the official verdicts, but in local legends, John Surratt is still depicted as a runaway son, leaving his mother to bear the blame, garnering more sympathy than hatred. Especially in the South, where she had lived, her name is spoken with a mournful tone and emblem of women's helplessness amidst male political chaos. In the North, years later, people began questioning, was her silence a form of resistance or mere blind faith in divine justice? The military trial of Mary and 7 others was swift, no jury, no opportunity for appeal. Some witnesses were traitors, granted immunity in exchange for testimony. The authorities aimed to close the case quickly. Lincoln was gone, and the nation needed reassurance. In this context, Mary became a necessary symbol, a mother, a Maryland native, boarding house owner, now branded as the woman accomplice of the president's assassin. But was she truly the figure they painted? A contentious detail still debated among scholars. Mary was executed on July 7, 1865, just 2 days after President Andrew Johnson rejected the plea for clemency from 5 of the 9 judges. More than half of the tribunal was uncertain about her death sentence. Yet, the new president, facing immense political pressure, wanted to demonstrate his toughness against enemies. Was that the reason? Or was there a deeper message and assertion to the South that blood would be paid in blood? As soldiers led Mary to the gallows, witnesses say she trembled not out of fear, but grief. Her final whispered words remain a matter of dispute. One guard claimed she begged God. Another said she spoke of her son. Some records note she simply uttered, "This is a terrible mistake." No one can be certain. Everything about her, from her supposed guilt to her last words, shrouded in fog. In local legends around Washington, D.C., stories tell of her spirit still lingering near the old Arsenal Penitentiary, place where her body was secretly buried. Some residents claim to have seen the shadow of a woman in black standing beneath a tree at dawn, silently gazing toward the White House. These stories, of course, are not in textbooks, but quietly persist as part of the nation's unresolved memory. When the hangman's noose tightened around Mary Surratt's neck on the morning of July 7, 1865, a dark milestone quietly inscribed itself into American history, the first time a woman was executed by the federal government. But beneath the headlines full of outrage and patriotism lay an unspoken silence that would last for decades afterward. Mary was gone, but questions surrounding her death remain alive, persistent, simmering, and arguably unjust. Was she truly an accomplice, or merely a sacrificial symbol amid America's wounded thirst for justice? For many years, no one dared to speak much of Mary Surratt. She disappeared from textbooks, memorial services, and political conversations. She was neither honored nor exonerated. Yet over time, more and more people revisited that case, as if history was trying to mend a moral fracture left behind by the Civil War, especially in the 20th century. When the trial records were declassified, the major contradictions in her conviction began to surface. One of the pieces of evidence used to accuse her the claim that she was present and knew about the conspiracy was essentially an extrapolation from ordinary behaviors. Mary had sent guns to acquaintances, had conversations with Booth, but what did that really mean? To many of her contemporaries, such actions by a worried mother, concerned about her son's clandestine activities, were understandable. But precisely because of her maternal loyalty, her fidelity, Mary was seen as a dangerous figure. Perhaps what makes her death so tragic isn't the verdict itself, but the long silence of a society that once applauded her execution. The silence that allowed a woman to be tried by the military without proper legal counsel. The silence that saw President Johnson reject clemency appeals from most of the judges, those who knew all too well that the case was riddled with holes. And the silence that hurried her body into an unmarked grave, without a monument or farewell, almost as if the government wanted to erase her existence altogether. But history is not so easily erased. In the early 21st century, a film titled The Conspirator, directed by Robert Redford, brought Mary Surratt back into the American consciousness, depicting her not as a mastermind, but as a victim pulled into a web of political hatred following Lincoln's death. The film sparked controversy, but also challenged long-held assumptions. It did what few dared before. Questioned the notions of justice in wartime and the right of a citizen of a mother, to defend herself. Today, on Mary Surratt's gravestone at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Washington, D.C., there are no lengthy inscriptions or political declarations. Only her name, birth year, and death year. A modest memorial, yet always adorned with fresh flowers, visits, paid silently by someone. Perhaps her descendants, sympathizers, or believers that for a nation to truly grow, it must face its unhealed wounds from the past. Mary's death did not erase the pain of Lincoln's loss, nor did it bring the reconciliation that authorities hoped for, but it left a lesson worth repeating, that in times of chaos, justice can become distorted, and hasty punishments can kill not only individuals, but also a nation's conscience. Mary Surratt may have made mistakes. She might have known more than she admitted. But that does not erase the truth that she was not given a fair trial. Looking back at that case with today's perspective after significant advances in civil rights, women's rights, and constitutional justice, we cannot help but feel a constriction in our throats, not because of what Mary did, but because of how we, as a society, responded. We remained silent, acquiesced, turned away, and the price of that turn is a mother hanged on the gallows, accused, not only for what she did, but because of the men surrounding her. Mary Surratt died as a symbol. But that symbol is not of crime. It is of the fragility of justice, a reminder that sometimes, in trying to heal a nation, we inadvertently inflict another wound upon our very soul.